All right, today we're going to talk about one of the most satisfying things you can possibly do in a garden, growing the perfect watermelon. It's a journey, for sure. It teaches you a ton about patience, a little bit of science, and it all leads to that amazing moment when you slice into a sweet, juicy melon that you grew yourself. So you ready? Let's get our hands dirty and learn how it's done.
You know this piece of wisdom from my grandma? It's really the whole secret right there. I remember my first time trying to grow them. The vines looked kind of sad, the melons were tiny, and I was so sure I'd failed. But she just told me they put on their weight at the end. Then one day they're perfect. And, well, she was right. That one experience taught me the most important lesson about watermelons. They work on their own schedule, and they really reward you if you just trust the process.
Okay, so time to get practical. A super sweet harvest doesn't just happen by accident. It all starts with some smart planning, because the choices you make right now are going to set the stage for the entire season.
First things first, how much space do you actually have? You've basically got two main choices here. If you've got a smaller garden, or maybe just a big raised bed, you've got bush varieties, like the sugar baby. They're really compact, only spreading a few feet. But if you've got room to let things run wild, you can go for a classic vining type, like a crimson sweet. These guys will run for 10, even 15 feet and give you those huge classic watermelons. So the bottom line is pretty simple. Pick the vine that actually fits your garden.
You know, everything starts from the ground up, and watermelons are really heavy feeders with these long roots, so you have to give them what they want. So what does that mean for us? Well, you've got to work the soil, loosening it up about 1 foot to 1.5 feet deep. Then you mix in a really generous amount of compost. And finally, you might want to check that pH. You're aiming for that sweet spot, somewhere between 6.0 and 6.8, because that's where the plant can soak up all those great nutrients you just gave it.
Okay, so our plan is set, the soil is prepped, now it's time to actually plant, and this is a really critical moment. Timing and temperature are a huge deal, and getting this part right gives your seeds the absolute best start they can get. Here it is, the single most important number to remember, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Watermelon seeds come from warm places, and they will simply not sprout if the soil is cold. Seriously, they'll just sit there and rot. They actually like it even warmer, closer to 80 degrees if you can get it. So whatever you do, don't rush it. A simple soil thermometer is your best friend here, trust me.
So what's the best way to get them in the ground? Honestly, direct sowing, planting the seeds right into your garden, is usually the best way to go. This lets the plant grow a really strong, deep taproot that helps it stay anchored and find water later on. Now, if you live somewhere with a short season and you have to start them indoors, just be super gentle. Use those little biodegradable pots you can plant right into the ground so you don't shock those super sensitive roots.
All right, so your seeds have sprouted, the vines are starting to take off, and now we enter the long middle part of the story. This whole phase is all about consistent care and, you guessed it, patience.
Water is obviously key, but how you water is what really matters. First up, you're going to aim for about 1 to 2 inches of water a week. Second, water deeply, but not too often. This actually encourages the roots to grow way down deep in the soil, which makes the whole plant stronger. And third, and this is a big one, try to water the soil, not the leaves. A soaker hose or drip irrigation is perfect for this because wet leaves are just an open invitation for nasty fungal diseases.
Okay, let's talk food. What do you feed these things? Well, the schedule is pretty important. Early on, you want a fertilizer that's high in nitrogen. That's what fuels all that leafy green growth. But here's the trick, right? The moment you see flowers and little baby melons starting to form, it's time to switch gears. You'll want to switch to a fertilizer that's higher in phosphorus and potassium. That helps the plant shift its energy into making sweet, healthy fruit.
And this brings us right back to my grandma's advice. Feed the vine until the melon's set, then starve it for sugar. Now, she didn't mean literally starve it, of course. What she meant was you ease up on the fertilizer, especially the nitrogen, as the fruit gets ripe. This little bit of stress actually encourages the plant to pour all its energy into making the fruit sweeter, concentrating those sugars and giving you that incredible, rich flavor instead of a watery melon.
So we've planned, we've planted, we've been patient, and now here it is. The moment we've all been waiting for, the harvest. This is where all that work pays off, but only if you pick that melon when it's at its absolute peak.
But how do you know? How do you know when it's really truly ready? This is the million-dollar question, and it's so important because unlike a banana, watermelons do not get any riper after you pick them. You get one shot to get it right. Luckily, the plant gives you some pretty clear signs if you know what to look for.
So you got to put on your detective hat and look for 3 super reliable clues.
First is the tendril test. Find the little curly tendril on the vine right next to the melon's stem. When that tendril turns brown and gets all dry, you're getting really close. Second, check the ground spot. That's the pale patch where the melon's been sitting. You want to see a creamy, buttery yellow color, not a stark white one. And finally, the classic sound check. Give it a good thump. A ripe melon will have a deep, hollow thump, kind of like knocking on a door, not a high-pitched tink.
Okay, look, the road to the perfect watermelon isn't always going to be perfectly smooth. Things happen. But don't worry, most of the common problems have pretty simple fixes. So let's run through a quick troubleshooting guide.
For instance, what if your fruit starts splitting? 9 times out of 10, that's caused by inconsistent watering, like a really long dry spell followed by a huge downpour. The fix is just trying to keep the moisture consistent, and mulch can really help with that. Or what about a melon that looks perfect, but it just isn't sweet? That is a classic sign you used too much nitrogen too late in the season, just like we talked about.
So we've gone through all the how-tos, right? But as we wrap this up, I think it's worth remembering the why behind all this. Because growing a watermelon really is about so much more than just the fruit.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? There's just something so deeply satisfying about this whole process. You get the soil ready, you give the plant what it needs, and then you just trust it to do its thing. I mean, in a world that moves so fast, that's all about getting things now, growing a watermelon kind of forces you to slow down, to be patient, and to really enjoy that sweet reward when the time is finally right. Happy growing!